Hello Year 7. In this lesson we're going to look at Kennings, and I know that some of you will have studied these before when you've looked at Beowulf in previous years of school. What I hope to do today is introduce you to some new vocabulary, and then we'll have a go at writing some of our own. I've put a link on your classroom to an animation of Beowulf, so do have a look if you don't know the story. But as an outline, Beowulf is the hero of the Geats, who are a Nordic tribe, and he goes to battle against three major enemies. So there's Grendel, which is a monster, Grendel's mother, because he thinks Grendel's gone, and then Grendel's mother comes along, and also a dragon. And Grendel had been terrorising the warriors who looked after the king of the Danes. So Beowulf goes home a hero, becomes king of the Geats, but is eventually killed in a final battle 50 years later. So if you watch the animation, it's about 40 minutes, so have a look if you don't know the story. If you already know the story, then you can move on to the next task. So here's a picture of the only known manuscript of Beowulf. It dates from around the year 1000, however, the poem is believed to be much older than that, and some historians think it dates right back to the year 750. So people would have heard this story in lots of different countries, and they would have had different versions depending on who heard it and who passed it down to them. But this is the only known manuscript. Now, your first task on your Google form is to tell me what you think the word manuscript literally means, and you can do that by looking at the etymology of the word. Etymology means where the word comes from, so its origins. So what you can do with words, we did this a little bit in lessons at the start of year 7, but if you have a look at that word manuscript, you can break it down into two parts. You've got script that you would recognise. Always look for the bit you recognise first, and then there's another bit you might recognise, which would be man. So you could do a bit of research, or you might be able to guess it, what a manuscript actually is, because you might have done this in French already, but there's a clue in the word man, because man in French, le main, is a part of the body, and you've got two of them. So that's your first clue. And the second clue, script, if you've got a script in front of you, something must have happened in order for that script to be there. So see if you can work out the meaning, the literal meaning of the word manuscript by looking at the etymology, where the words came from. The manuscript of Beowulf shows us that there were over 1,000 kennings in the poem Beowulf, over 1,000 kennings. So what we're going to do next is have a look at what a kenning is. So before we look at what a kenning is, we're going to have a look at the meaning of its name. So the etymology, the origin of the word kenning. Where does kenning come from? Well, to ken, the verb to ken, is still in use today. So if you've got any friends or relatives in Scotland, or maybe Northumberland sort of way, Newcastle or somewhere around there, if you ask them what to ken means, they would probably know. If you've ever heard a phrase like I dinna ken, that means I don't know, because to ken means to know, and that is where we get the word kenning from. Kenning links into the idea of knowing, and you'll see why in a moment. The word ken ultimately derives from a Proto-Indo-European root that's spelt G-N-E-H, but that G would be pronounced as a hard sound, so kn, kn. And that's where we get the word know from. So you know the silent K that we still have, originally you would have pronounced that with that G with the little accent on the top, so it would have been kn, kn. I know, I know. Whereas we drop the K, because it does sound silly, and we now say I know. It's also where we get Latin-derived terms such as cognition and ignorant. See, the Greek gnosis as well. So that's where we've carried on the gn part. Now your job now is to look up words with the root gno, So what you need to do is, if you go to etymonline.com, go to that website and then type in either the word know, so K-N-O-W, so either type in the word know or type in the word kenning, and read through carefully, and you will find that root. And then if you click on that root, it will give you a whole list of words that link to that root gno. But just to give you one to start off with, if you think about the word diagnosis, so if you make a diagnosis, you decide something, don't you? You make a decision on something based on evidence in front of you or what you can see. So thinking about that gnosis idea and the fact that gno means to know, a diagnosis means that the gnosis bit means you know it, and the dia bit means a part. So a diagnosis is when you are able to know and separate information. You're able to tell apart what's in front of you. You can see what's important. You can see what's significant. That's what diagnosis means. Right then, so this is cool. So a kenning, we know now that the word kenning comes from the idea of knowing. And really what that's telling us is that when you use a kenning, it's to help somebody who's reading that kenning know something. So you're using kennings to get your message across, to help people know things. And a kenning, it's a figure of speech in the type of circumlocution. So this word, circumlocution, I would like you to see if you can work out what that word means. And again, you'll need to look at the etymology, look at where these words come from. But you should be able to kind of start to figure it out just by looking again at the parts of the word. So if you look at the first part of the word circ, you shouldn't need to go too far to think of some words that relate to the idea of that, C-I-R-C, circ. You probably can think of a word that starts circum that you will have used in maths or so on. So you'll have an idea of what that circ might mean. And then the locution bit, so loci, and locution, elocution lessons. If you have elocution lessons, what are people trying to help you with? Try and figure out what circumlocution is. Try and figure out how to say it as well. Circumlocution. Have a go and put down your definition of the word's meaning, and I mean the etymological meaning. So what does circum mean and what does locution mean? So a kenning is something to do with circumlocution, and it's also a compound. Now a compound, you'll come across these in science, and a compound is when you put two or more things together. So a compound, you put things together. So a kenning puts words together, and it uses figurative language. Now, figurative language means not literal. So you're using figurative language, you're creating pictures or comparisons, or it's not a literal description of something. You're using figurative language in place of a more concrete, a more solid, a more obvious single word noun. So therefore, a kenning is a word that you use to help somebody understand something. You help them to know something. It's something to do with circumlocution. It's something to do with figurative language, not literal. So you should be starting to think, well, maybe this is some sort of metaphor. And if you are thinking maybe it's some sort of metaphor, you would be correct. Because a kenning is a word or phrase that is used to describe something in a way that allows somebody to picture it, to understand what it is without just using the obvious. So we'll have a look at some examples. A kenning always has two parts. There's a base word, known as a head word, and a determinant. So we'll have a look at those in a minute. And the thing, person, place or being to which the kenning refers is known as its referent. So we'll have a look at some examples now. So here we see some examples of kennings, and here's where you can start to understand the figurative aspect of this language. This isn't literal, it's using words and associations and images relating to the referent, to the thing that you're describing, but you're using quite abstract ideas and putting them together. So the first one is bone house. So if you had to work out what a bone house was, if you had to think, well, what would a house of bones be? It's not too big a leap to realise that this is talking about the human body. Bone house, the human body. It's a house for bones. Cool. The next ones we've got battle light, which is a sword. So I guess a light of battle. I suppose it could be, the light could be the silver of the metal shining, I guess. Wave floater, that's a ship. A wave floater, it floats on the waves. Descriptions of the sea included, I love this one, I love this, whale road. What's that over there? Is it the sea? No, it's the whale road. It's a road for whales. Fish home, seal bath, I like that one as well. I mean, that is just narcissistic to the nth degree, isn't it? What is this? It's the sea. No. It's my bath, says the seal. It's a bath for me. Brilliant. So your final task this lesson is to create your own kennings. Now there's a list of things here that you could use as your referent. So you need to come up with kennings to describe the sky or fire. But I'd like you to be really creative and come up with your own objects as well. So your own referents. And what you could do is illustrate them. You could do pictures and then write your kenning at the bottom. And then, like we've done with the runes messages, you could post those on your classroom stream and see if people can guess what it is you're talking about. So if we were to think back to the other one with my favourite whale road, you might draw a road with a whale on it, and then people would have to guess what it was you were talking about. So create your own kennings, any of these items or anything else from your imagination. Enjoy, and we look forward to seeing your work.